Good evening, Bulls fans. I'm starting a little bit earlier in 10 p.m. And wait a few more minutes. I want to wrap this up quickly tonight. I am, as always, Matt Gritzmacher. I am not joined by John McWhinney tonight as he prepares for final exams in his senior year. Next year, we'll have much more time out of him for a Bull Run. This is the Bull Run Olympic Sports Podcast, Olympic Rundown. We're nearing the end of the year. By now, you know what's up. Sundays at 10, we talk about the weekend that was for UB Sports outside of basketball and football. And in the spring season, it definitely slows down a bit. There are times, especially in the fall, especially in the late fall, and in the early spring where we have lots of sports going on. We're talking about 8, 9 different teams at once. In the spring, it slows down. We've got the two diamond sports, baseball and softball. We've got men's and women's tennis, track and field, and rowing. That's really everything that's in action now from now till the end of the year, which isn't that far away. We've probably only got a half dozen more of these shows before track and field nationals is kind of the end of the season if we have someone qualify for that. Bull Run Awards, which will be a week-long post series that will come the week after track nationals, or if no one qualifies for nationals, the week after Eastern regionals or whatever it is, the meet before nationals, since track will be the last team. So we're kind of winding down here. Doesn't mean there's not plenty to talk about. Doesn't mean there's not some very exciting things to talk about. The absolute highlight of the weekend for UB Sports was the softball team, which capped a 3-game sweep yesterday of Bowling Green. They've moved to 8-6 in the MAC. They are currently sitting tied for third with Kent State in the East Division, which is pretty solid. The only reason they're not tied also with Akron is because Akron somehow has a tie on their record from a game with Central Michigan. I don't want to think too hard about how that could happen other than weather or nighttime. Really strong season so far from softball in MAC play, at least. I've been saying all year that even if the record hasn't come along, I think the team still only has 14 wins. They're 14-27. So even if the record hasn't quite issues that defined this team last year, inconsistent pitching, really bad defense up and down, and an inconsistent lineup that really struggled outside of one or two regular contributors. Even if the team hasn't won as much, they've really plugged those holes and avoided the pitching still hasn't been great, but it's gotten more consistent. The defense has taken a huge step forward. The team still gives up sometimes some big rallies late, but it's not the same as it was last year. And the lineup, if not an offensive powerhouse, has some really solid, consistent contributors at the top, some really solid, consistent contributors through the middle, and in games and weeks where the bottom of the lineup starts to contribute, you get a really solid offensive performance. And that's what we got this weekend as the Bulls swept the series from Bowling Green. I said that they scored 28 runs on the weekend, beating the Falcons 9-0 on Friday, 9-3 on Saturday, and 10-5 Saturday afternoon. So a real solid weekend, and really some of that could have been much worse. Even though it was 9-0 in just 5 innings in the opener, UB stranded 8 base runners in the first 3 innings, both in the second and the third. Katie Weimer ended the innings with the bases loaded. That could have been a much more lopsided game. But I'd rather have a lot of base runners turning into a moderate amount of runs rather than kind of continually needing to score every single base runner to get all your runs. It is a numbers game. Like natural selection, you get more on, you're likely to score more runs. So getting more on is the way we'd like it. I mentioned Weimer. She's really been, if you've paid attention to softball at all, the absolute surprise of the year. Local freshman from Orchard Park coming in and stepping right in. I think we had other freshman recruits who I certainly heralded more highly. Courtney Gilbert is one on the offensive side. Lace Smith and Allie Power are others from the pitcher circle. But Weimer has come in, and she is, after this weekend, I said that she left the bases loaded twice in the first game. But in the first game on Saturday, she hit a 3-run home run, and in the second game on Saturday, she hit a solo shot of her own to add 4 RBIs to her season total. She's up to 39 on the year now, and the school record is 43. Held by Breeby's best all time, and is now the head coach at Adelphi University. And so Weimer as a freshman is really shaping up for one of the best and most productive offensive seasons in history. She doesn't quite hit the home runs like Sammy Gallardo and Holly Luciano did a couple seasons ago, but she's just pokes in the runs. And a big part of that is the top of the order for UB. Savannah Norcio added another 6 hits this weekend. A rotating combination of Leandra Drew and Ashton Earnhardt continue to get on base for the Bulls. This is the type of stuff that we didn't see last year. We didn't see it consistently. And even if the Bulls didn't win as much as we'd like in the long early season road trip, they have been able to contribute and really pull something together in MAC play now. They're 8-6 after this weekend. They've got a 3-game series next weekend with Kent State, who is also 8-6. That's pretty critical. The weekend after that, they've got a 3-game series with Ohio, who are 7-5 right now, 7-7 right now. So if they can win both of those series, they could really half finish in the conference. That might be wishful thinking, considering that their final series is against Miami, who is tops in the conference right now at 10-3. But there's definitely some winnable games left. And then out of conference, they've got 2 versus Binghamton and 2 versus Niagara. And I have particular interest in the Niagara games because between softball and baseball, if they can close out their years with sweeps of Niagara, we will hit a full calendar year without a loss to the Purple Eagles in any sport, which I would just really like to see that happen. I mentioned Katie Weimer in the offensive end. From the pitcher circle, we've really seen sophomore Charlotte Miller step in and become UB's most consistent pitcher. I've mentioned that I really touted Lace Smith and Allie Power earlier in the year, and they've had flashes of success, as has Brianna Baker, another upstate New York freshman. But Miller has really rounded into the most consistent pitcher. And even as UB's offense took a little while to get going, it still ended up scoring 9 in 4 innings. In the first game, she pitched 5 innings, she's not a great strikeout pitcher. She only had 3 strikeouts, but UB could have only scored 1 run and they would have won that game the way Miller was pitching. She came back the next day, got the start again, gave up a few more runs, gave up 3 runs through 6 innings. But by that point, UB had scored 9 in the first 3 innings and really had a real controlling lead. And out of that, Lace Smith pitched the last inning and then started the afternoon game. She also gave up 3 runs in 6 innings. But again, by that point, UB had scored 7, and they would score 3 more in the bottom of the 6th after she threw her last pitch. And really was never any concern for Buffalo. The pitching was more than enough considering how good the offense was. On the flip side, Bowling Green's pitchers had 4 walks, 6 walks, and 7 walks in the 3 games. So really took advantage of a team that's just frankly not good. But when it comes down to it, the first step to becoming a winning team is winning all the games that you should, and we definitely saw that this weekend from softball. Teams that desperately need better facilities, if I can wink that in there, is baseball was swept by Miami this week, losing Friday 6-0, yesterday 3-0, and today 7-6 in extra innings. And really, the first game, 6-0, was a slow chip away at the Bulls. They only got 5 hits on the game, couldn't turn any of them into base runners. Did have three walks in addition to that. Miami never really had a big inning. They just continued to add runs and make it so that UB couldn't rally back there. Tim, who is our kind of resident baseball expert, and I end up following the team a little bit less because I know he's got them covered, said that was really the first game of MAC play where the pitchers maybe weren't as on. They've been very impressive through conference play. This time, Alec Tui gave up 4 earned runs in 6 innings. Certainly not terrible at all, but UB was only able to pull together 8 base runners, 9 base runners if we count a Miami error, and it just wasn't enough to really score anything. Time they got up. The Saturday game, all of Miami's runs did come in a single inning late in the game. Again, UB was close and hanging with them for a while, but again, only put together 5 hits and couldn't do anything with them. In that one, it was Charlie Sobraski on the mound, and he again didn't do too poorly. Pitched into the 7th. That is really good for a college pitcher to do that consistently. Only 1 of his runs were earned, but they ended up giving up 3 runs and couldn't do anything with 5 hits and 5 walks. In both of these 2 games, Bobby Shepard at the top of the order had multiple hit games. He's really turned into a pretty solid season. I think he's hitting now .331 on the year. Yes, because today in Sunday's game, the offense finally got going. UB matched the Red Hawks with 12 hits. Shepard was 5 for 5, which I think could be his second or third 5-hit game of the year. One of the reasons I really like having John along is I can research things like this. It's laying down. Yeah, Shepard was 5 for 5 in a win against Northeastern, and he's 5 for 5 today. So it's the second 5 for 5 game of the year, and he also has a 4-hit game to his credit against Eastern. So he's really showing up at the top of the order. And you get on base 5 times, 7 times, 5 for 5 with 2 walks. That's a solid day. You get on base 7 times. He ended up scoring 3 runs, had an RBI as well. UB had the early lead in this one. They took a run in the first inning, and then after Miami scored in the second, got another run and took a 2-1 lead really into the end stretches of the game. Miami pulled ahead 4-2, and then UB took the lead again in the 8th, needed a run to force extra innings in the bottom of the 9th, and did that as well, and then just couldn't hold on deep into the game, and Miami got a run at the top of the 12th. In this one, we really saw some pretty solid long performances from really the back of the rotation by the time you get to Sunday. Helps out that Sobraski went into the 7th as well. That certainly made it easier for UB to weather a 12-inning game today. Couldn't quite pull out the win, but Sean Dubin went into the 6th, only gave up 2 runs. Mike Kalin gave up 1 earned run, 2 earned runs, and just under 3 innings worth of work. And then Brandon Mumma pitched into deep relief, pitching 4 full innings and giving up a couple runs. But over 4 innings, you hope that you can weather that, and UB wasn't able to. They weren't able to push a run across in extras. If I pull up play-by-play, it looks like in the 10th, UB got a leadoff hitter on and couldn't turn it into anything, even though Tui advanced to second with 1 out and third with 2 outs. In the 11th, they got the leadoff runner on, and then got him to second with 1 out, got a second runner on, an intentional walk, and then grounded into a double play. That is a hard way to kill a rally. And then the 12th, outs on a fielding error. So they got base runners on in all the extra innings. That's a way to get runs, and it just didn't come together for the Bulls here against Miami. For the year, I think they're probably well down in the standings. They haven't quite had the surge, even if they've been much stronger in MAC play than they were out of conference. They're 4-8. They're tied with Bowling Green for last in the MAC East, although 3 of the half the MAC West has worse records than that. So there's still time here. They still have series against Northern Illinois, Ball State, Kent State, and Bowling Green. Wow, their season doesn't end until late May. So they've still got 4 series left in the year. That Bowling Green series is a chance for a couple wins. Northern Illinois and Ball State are 1-2 in the East, and Kent State is tied with Miami for the top of the East. So we'll see what happens out of them. Right now, the thing is Bobby Shepard continues to absolutely rake. He had, let me do math here, 9 hits and 2 walks on the weekend. Considering that UB was shut out in 2 of their games, to still have 9 hits is solid. Real strong performance from him. We're looking forward to see what can kind of come together in the second half, the last stretches of this. I shouldn't say second half of the season, second half of the MAC season for baseball. It would have been great to get that 1 win out of their best performance today, but we'll see what happens. Moving on, I guess I'll go to rowing next because I want to save tennis. Rowing was at a regatta hosted by George Mason University down here in Northern Virginia on the weekend. And this was their opportunity to compete heads up against Eastern Michigan in the Harvey Cup, which is only the varsity 8 boat, even though they row a couple different boats. But they went heads up against Eastern Michigan. They also went heads up against George Washington. And I don't think they raced anyone else. See as I go through here. But the real headliner here is the race against Eastern Michigan, the Harvey Cup. In that particular one, the varsity 8, Eastern Michigan eked out the Bulls by 2 seconds, 6:55 to 6:57. Bit of a bummer there. I think it's the second or third straight year that Eastern Michigan has won the Harvey Cup. Don't quote me on that at all. I'm pulling that out of my head, but I feel like it's at least 3, and I don't think it's more than 4. So we'll see. I'll look it up later and tell you next week. UB also lost by 2 seconds in the second varsity 8. Did get a win against EMU in the varsity 4. Those are the 3 races they went heads up against the Eagles in. That's, what it is. I think that the Eagles are also in the Colonial Athletic when it comes to rowing with us. I could be wrong in that. In the third varsity 8, it looks like UB came in last. Oh, hold on. They came in, and then the third varsity 8 came in last. That is what it is. Rowing is really tough. I say this every single time. It's tough because it's hard to have any perspective on it at all, in what it means from meet to meet and from competition to competition. In the heads-up races against George Washington later in the day, UB lost pretty much. They did lose across the board by substantially larger margins than they did to Eastern Michigan. Bit of a bummer there. They did finish second in a novice 8 race against Delaware and Duquesne here at this meet. That is what it is. If I look here at the other meets, that is the heads up against. Okay, that has nothing new. And that's that for rowing. Let me pull them up really quickly and see if they have anything else before their conference championships. This was the Mason invite. All right, so they're in New Jersey in 2 weeks at the beginning of May with one more regatta before their conference championships in a month in mid-May. And that's also going to be in New Jersey. I'm not sure who's hosting that in the conference, but that's what's up with them. They don't necessarily have a short season, but they have infrequent competition. They were in action in Virginia this weekend. I lost track and field. I didn't mean to do that. Certainly the roller coaster of the weekend came from the 2 tennis teams. I think coming into this weekend, we saw that the women were on a 2-match losing streak with losses to Western Michigan and Miami, who are 2 stronger teams in the conference. And then last Sunday, they were on a 2-game losing streak earlier, but last Sunday they had a real strong comeback win against conference leaders Ball State, 4-3. I talked about that last week. Really big momentum swing, put them in position for not just a spot in the MAC tournament, which they eked into last year in the 6th spot, but a spot to claim the 4 or maybe even the 3 seed and get a real favorable matchup, with that win over Ball State. And then they came out on Friday and beat Northern Illinois 5-2 on the road. Well, not on the road. It was at Toledo, but on the road for both teams, I guess. That was real solid. The big note there was that freshman Mercedes Losada Rubio moved up to second singles for the first time on the season. Fellow freshman Chantel Martinez Blanco had been at second singles for much of the year. She came down to third. All 3 of UB's freshmen on the women's side have had very strong seasons. Martinez Blanco stepped right up into second singles after a very strong fall year, and has been real solid there. Sanjana Sadhir at 5th singles has something like 14 or 15 wins. I put in the recap and I don't have it available to me now, but she's been a real consistent, solid performer, frequently in straight sets for UB down at the bottom of the lineup. And moved up from kind of 5th or 6th singles all the way now up to second. And she got an easy straight set win over her opponent from Northern Illinois. UB here really coasted. They took 2 doubles sets, 6-1 and 6-3 to finish it pretty quickly there. And then their singles wins all came in straight sets, 6-2, 6-0 from Losada Rubio, 6-3, 6-0 from Martinez Blanco, 6-2, 6-2 from Laura Halterbosch, and 6-0, 6-1 from Sanjana Sadhir. So that was Friday. Also on Friday, we had the men's schedule, and the men had 1-2 in a row. Before Friday, they had lost one. And then they were going up against Ball State on Friday, end up losing that one 4-3. That put them in a two-game losing streak and really dropped them into a real precarious position for even making it in the MAC tournament. If you'll remember, last year they only made the MAC tournament by the skin of their teeth, really thanks in part to a late win over Ball State. That was the tiebreaker that put them in and got them a chance, which they then made the most of and won the conference championship for the first time in program history. This year, this loss to Ball State really looked like a backbreaker. It came 4-3. UB dropped the doubles point in really a relatively tight competition. Each team won a pretty simple set, and then all that was left was first doubles. And Pablo Alvarez and Amar Hromich were in that one to the end. It went to 6-4. So if they had won that, what would become the final game would have been 5-5, and that set would have kept going. And then in singles, Ball State took a quick win at 1 and got a win at 6, and UB in the meantime got a win from Akil Mehta at 4. Were able to pull to within 3-2, and even got to 3-3 with a win from Amar Hromich in 3 sets. And it came down, as it really has a lot this season, just the unlucky draw of the cards, to Ethan Nitolo, who is now down to 5 singles. In his 7-5, he was on serve, and he was broken. His serve was broken for the final match point, which is a bummer. I should just pull up what I wrote about him. He's had an inordinate number of matches go to 3 sets this year, and it's really tough for a freshman. The number of times he's kind of been thrown into competition where the whole match is hinging on him, really. And let me pull this up because I want to make sure I get the numbers right. He has gone to third sets 15 times this year, and he's just 4-11. Or he's 4-11 this spring total. He's had 15 matches. He's gone to third sets 8 times, more than half the time, and he's only 2-6 in those. And he actually won his first 2 third sets. The last time he won a third set was Cornell in late January. And so 6 straight losses in matches that go the distance for the freshman, which some extent is luck. That's really tough to deal with. And in particular for him, it feels like this is the 4th time that it's come down that he's in a third set and the match hinges on him. And so that was a frustrating loss. And it dropped the Bulls to 2 and 3, really put them on the brink. The men got a huge bounce back win today with a 5-2 win over Northern Illinois. NIU was above them in the standings. They're now tied along with Ball State. And so that's a real messy tiebreaker for now. But this win over NIU, of those 3 teams, they won't remain tied because they have to have 7 matches. But, it just is big right now because they now have a win over someone who's close to them. They also have a win over Binghamton from early in the year, but they'll be playing Binghamton again to close out the season. Today, UB pretty quickly earned the doubles points with a 6-4 win at third and a 6-1 win at first. And then, just like the women did earlier in the weekend, got wins from 2, 3, 4 in this one, including a nice bounce-back win from Nitolo. Akil Mehta took another straight set win, and Amar Hromich and Sergio Alvarado. That's the first time I've pronounced his name smoothly. Don't know if it's right or not. It's the first time I managed it. Both got wins in 3 sets at 3 and 2 singles. Pablo Alvarez and Arturas Kulikovsky both went down in straight sets at 1 and 6. But with that win, the men are really right back in it when it comes to standings and such. They only have 1 match left on the year. It is against Binghamton. Binghamton right now is technically above them in the standings, but it's because they are the one of 2 teams in the conference that still have 2 matches to go. And so they're 3 and 2 with their next match against UB. But right now, UB, Northern Illinois, and Ball State are all 3 and 3, and Binghamton is effectively there as well. And there's basically 4 teams gunning for 3 spots, and we'll see how it breaks down. UB right now is a win over Binghamton and a win over Northern Illinois and a loss to Ball State, with just 1 match against the Bearcats coming in. That's on Thursday. Binghamton's other match is against Toledo, and I think Ball State also gets to play Toledo. No, Ball State and Northern Illinois go against each other. But one of those teams is going to be 3 and 4, and it's a question of who else will be 3 and 4. Maybe if Binghamton will be 5 and 2. It's a question of if UB can get a win. If UB beats Binghamton, they're in, because one of Northern Illinois and Ball State will be 3 and 4. But I think they're unlikely to jump Binghamton, just because Binghamton still has other matches against Toledo. Oh, that's a lie. Binghamton's other matches against Northern Illinois. Oh, well, I'm all twisted then. Okay, restart. Ball State's matches against Toledo. They're unlikely to lose that. So Ball State's likely going to get to 4 and 3. Northern Illinois and Binghamton go against each other. So that's another loss combined for one of them, but it's also another win for one of them. Likely be 4 and 3, and one of Northern Illinois and Binghamton will be 4 and 3 as well. If Buffalo doesn't beat Binghamton, then Binghamton will have 4 wins with a chance for a 5th. I'm assuming Ball State will beat Toledo and get to 4, and then Northern Illinois will have a chance to get to 4 wins. So basically, if Buffalo beats Binghamton, they are almost certainly in. If Buffalo loses against Binghamton, we need to root pretty heavily for Northern Illinois to take them down on the season's last day, just a couple days later. I will have that all written up later in the week when I haven't done it right off the top of my head. But the moral of the story is today, a real important bounce back win for UB has put them in a near win and you're in situation. I guess Binghamton can't get to 4 and 3 and pass Buffalo. Northern Illinois can't get to more than 4. Yeah, so if UB beats Binghamton, they're in. And we'll prepare for the other situation. On the flip side, the women, their first match this weekend really had us excited. If they could have beaten Akron, who was sitting at 3 and 3 heading into the match, they would have positioned themselves for maybe a run at the number 3 seed in conference. But they ended up losing 4-3 to Akron. A real, maybe not a bad loss, because Akron's number 1, whose name I can't remember right now, Ariadna Blinova, is real solid. She's one of the better singles players in the MAC. But UB lost the doubles point really without too much issue, and then needed to win 4 of 6 singles, and they won 3. They got wins from Chantal Martinez Blanco, Laura Holterbosch, and Sanjana Satir at 3, 4, and 5. And then even though Stoyanovska and Mercedes Losada Rubio went down at 1 and 2 in straight sets, Christine Haraldson made it to a 3rd set, had won her 2nd set, and was trying to finish a comeback win, ended up losing 6-3 there. So the Bulls were in at even point, and that is not a bad loss. I think Akron's, like I said, their top 2 singles players are real solid for the MAC. But it kind of stinks. I was looking for UB women to really finish the season very strong, with, I believe, what would have been 4 straight wins if they could have beaten Akron and go on to beat Bowling Green. That's not going to happen. They're still in great shape. They've clinched a spot in the MAC tournament already with 7 of 8 matches done. I don't know if they beat Toledo. They did beat Toledo. So they can't drop below 5th, which is where they sit right now. With a win over Bowling Green, which I think should be expected. They're winless on the year, have only 2 wins overall. UB could leapfrog Akron and move back up into 5th, but Ball State, Western Michigan, and Miami all only have 1 loss. One of those, UB's win over Ball State, did come from the Bulls, but otherwise they didn't perform so well against the top of the conference. They lost 5-2 to both Western and Miami. So the women have just 1 left. They're pretty much locked into 5th, I think. Maybe I'll double check and see who Akron is playing. If they can beat Bowling Green and Akron loses, then they move up into 4th, which is a 2-spot improvement over last year. And even last year, remember, they did finish 6th, but they finished 6th only because they had only 7 matches on their ledger, because they weren't able to play at Ball State because of politics. So even last year, that sixth place was a bit inflated. If they had played to and lost Ball State, they would not have made the MAC championship. So Akron's remaining game is also against Bowling Green before UB plays the Falcons. So I'd be surprised if the Bulls could jump the Zips. That kind of head-to-head matchup and tiebreaker situation basically came down to this weekend's match. Bit of a momentum killer, that loss for sure, but nothing that's clinched a spot in the MAC tournament, which is real solid, very exciting. When it comes to that, definitely improvement over this year. And unlike the men have 4 seniors. I said at the beginning of the year, they've lost some top-end talent. The experience is there, the leadership is there. Let's see what happens as the depth is forced to move up and play at a higher level than last year. And it's been streaky, but it hasn't quite come together as much as I expected it to. It certainly didn't come together like I expected it to last year until quite literally the last 2 matches of the season when they pulled out 2 wins and took the championship. The women, on the other hand, have a much firmer foundation, I think. They've only got 1 senior, and that's Diana Gassieva, who hasn't competed in the singles lineup in a very long time, and so is only 1/2 of a doubles pairing. And otherwise, everyone's coming back. I mentioned the freshmen, Chantel Martinez-Blanco, Mercedes Lozada-Rubio, and Sanjana Sudhir. They all have winning records as freshmen. That's half of UB's singles lineup. The future is very on this year when the time comes and we talk about it further. That brings us to track and field, who I've said it before, the spring has been less exciting for track and field because a lot of the real marquee names are sitting, whether for Olympic trials or because of injury or anything like that. They have a very long season. They will compete to the end of May no matter what. If someone qualifies for the NCAA championships, they'll compete to the second weekend in June. This weekend, they had a 1-day competition at UConn. Next week, they'll go to Ohio State, and the week after, they'll be at the famous Penn Relays. Here at UConn, it was a relatively small field. It was just the Bulls, UConn, Albany, Northeastern Rhode Island, and Southern Connecticut State. So not a huge field. UConn has a very strong track and field program, oddly. Maybe I'm unfair to Connecticut, but I really don't like them. So I'm going to say that's odd that they have a strong track and field program. And Northeastern's is pretty good as well, as is Albany's. So small field, a moderate amount of competition, certainly in the Northeast against teams that we see in cross-country season. We see when we stick regionally in track and field. UB had a pretty good group of finishers, not too many winners, but a lot of top 5 finishers. The men's distance found winners from Barrett Kemp in the steeplechase, and a couple other top performances from Austin Coneys, Justin Van Epps, and John McCarthy. On the sprinting side, that's really all year. John and I have been saying it since January. The sprinting side is what's really been impressive for track and field. And the women's 4x1 is, I think on the men's side, I'm more interested in the 400s. And on the women's side, I'm more interested in the 4x1, the 100s, where you've got Malaya White, you've got Kamaria Long, you've got Tyra Forbes, Selena Vonjakowski. That relay on the women's side was actually disqualified this meet, second time this year that's happened, which is a bummer. We'd love to see it happen once, but if it only happens at the MAC championships, I'm okay with that. If a soccer team wants to win 1-0 all the way to the national championship from the men's 4x1, which was real solid. That's exciting. Again, sprinters have been a surprise this year. Darian Johnson, obviously, we mentioned him for a couple school records. Mitch Moore, Mitch Fuller, Christian Doherty. I'm not entirely sure who was in the 4x1 relay, but there's a good group of sprinters for the Bulls. I mentioned Mitch Moore. He also won the 400-meter hurdles. Christian Doherty, Mitch Fuller also finished top 5 in a couple different sprinters. Josh Galley in the 400 finished top 5. He's still a little over a half a second off from the UB school record. He's got time to break it. I'd really love to see him break it, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen this year. We'll see what an offseason of weight training does. Field events, Ryan Cribben isn't quite the dominating force that John Jones was last year. Still a real solid shot putter. I think he's UB's best chance of the active guys to qualify for nationals. He finished second in the shot put, 17.3 meters. I think he's been over 18 this season. I'd like to see him start to hit 18 pretty regularly. of course, is not in action this spring. Austin Price continues to up his long jump numbers in the over the course of the season. He had a season best 7.2 meters. UB's other best long jumpers over the last couple of years have been between 7.3 and 7.6 meters. So if Price can get up there and hit where Billion was, hit where Ashby was, has been, that'll be real solid for the Bulls. I don't know if anybody had anything in the high jump. On the women's side, Tyra Forbes was second in the 100-meter dash. Amy Shaw was second in the 15. Again, more sprinters. Selena Vonjakowski was fourth overall in the 100 hurdles. And Sharday Henry placed sixth overall in the 800. Field events on the women's side, I've mentioned a couple times this year that the women's throwers are really rounding into form. Are they MAC champion caliber throwers? Maybe not, but they're definitely all improving, and they're regularly finishing in the top groups of their meets. This time it was just Dhaliwal in the discus, second place. Taylor Woods fourth, also in the discus. Joanna Hallisey and Meg Patterson both finished third in the shot put. Well, I guess they tied for third. And in the jumps, Michaela Pierce and Crystal Henderson finished third and fifth in the long jump. So a small field of competition, but some strong Northeast programs there. Northeastern, Albany, UConn, all pretty strong Northeastern programs. And UB had a good handful of top 5 finishes. They are next week at Ohio State. I would bet there'd be both a larger and a more prestigious field there. It'll be really nice to see something there. And 2 weeks from now is the Penn Relays, which was when it would be really nice to see some standout events. I would bet that some of the names that we expected to see and aren't in action this spring could be in action at the Penn Relays. There's opportunities for open slots there. We might see John Jones there, not even on the team, not even sitting out, but just trains and athlon that we'd be able to see Mike Morgan in. Maybe I'm shooting blanks here, but it would be nice to see who else. Some of the 800 guys, Sheving and Crimmins would be nice to see. That's 2 weeks away. We'll be talking again before then. But next week they'll be in Columbus at Ohio State. That is track and field. I mentioned softball has a real key for standings series against Kent State this weekend. Baseball, already forgotten which of the remaining series baseball is up against, but I'll pull it up right now. They're coming up. They might have a midweek game or two as well. Baseball has 2 games. Nope, too far. A game against Canisius. Can't stand them. And then a road series at Northern Illinois this coming weekend. Softball has that at Kent State. Men's and women's tennis wrapping up their season. The men with Binghamton in a win and you're in situation. If they lose, we're really rooting for Northern Illinois over Binghamton a couple days later. Women's tennis has Bowling Green to finish out. They're unlikely to jump Akron again after this weekend's loss, but they are already in the tournament. That Bowling Green match should be a nice tune-up for the Bulls. I don't see there being much of a challenge there. Rowing has 2 weeks off, and that is the entire spring slate. Wrestling. I promise you wrestling news. One, we got a recruit in wrestling this week. Logan Moriarty from Jefferson City, Missouri. Definitely a bit of a further reach recruiting-wise for John Stutzman, which is nice to see. He hasn't been shy about recruiting outside of New York and Pennsylvania. To some extent, you don't need to build a quality program. There's lots of strong wrestlers there. But in Joe Areola and Kyle Akins, you see guys from Indiana and Illinois. Tommy Fortes from Indiana. You might not know that name yet, but you should. Here we've got a guy from Missouri. He was the state champ at 170 pounds in Missouri. John McWinney tells me it doesn't look like he's actually been wrestling for that long. A lot of these real top-tier wrestlers started in like 5th grade. But in his last 2 years, he was 62-8 and finished 1st and 3rd in his state. That's real solid. John says that he beat the number 17 guy in the nation a couple times. That guy's headed to Missouri. So that's a real, just based on those numbers, which is not a lot, real top of the MAC caliber recruit there. John will, once finals end, hopefully have more on the wrestling recruiting class. If not, I will poke him and make sure that we have something to say about them. Because there was another name a week or two earlier that I was not able to track down. The real big news that just came out today from wrestling, it's the whole reason I put wrestling on the agenda, is that Tyler Rill is coming back for another year. He was UB's day one starter this year at 165. After missing a year last year, he tore his hamstring off the bone in his first match last year in 2014-15. And he at times this year looked like someone who could finish top 2 or 3 in the MAC, kind of faded away, had another injury. Just announced today by Coach Sussman on Twitter that he will be back, which is wonderful. Rill originally was following Stutzman to Bloomsburg. I don't know if he wrestled a season at Bloomsburg, if he was originally just planning to go to Bloomsburg and ended up at Buffalo. But he's a long Stutzman, really great to see. Really solid for UB to have another senior leader. This is after the news, maybe 2 or 3 weeks old, maybe even a month old, that Muhammad McBride was granted another year of eligibility. He's at 174. That's another senior who will be able to help out next year with what is still a very young and growing team, one that outperformed all of its seeds at the MAC tournament, MAC championships, and sent 3 guys to nationals. Having another year of both those two in their senior leadership could be very, very big. So that's that. I went over the schedules. Not many teams in action anymore. Went over all of them. Don't know when John's finals end, but we will get him back on as soon as we can. I think I'll still be alone next week, but you know where to find us, 10 p.m. on Sundays. Olympic Rundown. I've given that spiel 25, 30 times this year now. You know what's up. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. Thanks for reading Bull Run. We appreciate it so, so much. Go softball. Go tennis. I really want to see Katie Weimer set the single season record. She's 3-4 RBIs away from tying it with a lot of games left, and it doesn't take much. She hits a double that clears the bases. That gets her to within 1, and that can happen, like I said at the beginning, the way that Savannah Norcio and Ashton Ehrenhardt are getting on base. So that's what I'm looking out for in the next week. We will tell you all about what happened next Sunday. Have a wonderful week.